This is the voice of Bold Business Radio. I am your host, Jess Dewell. You are listening to Double Standards Facing Working Parents. The question I'm going to ask our panelists today is a little charged. And I knew it when I asked the question. I knew it when I named the show. And the thing is, it's really important to understand all of the layers that go with the answers and the dialogue and the discussion in the program today. And I'm telling you that because we as leaders lead by example. And Scott and I, we were just talking about this. What we think might be happening might not actually be what's happening because of a blinder we might be wearing. And so the conversation that I'm expecting to have today is going to hit all levels. How it hurts, how we wish it was different, how we want other people to join us at the table, how we define things, how we can see the gaps between what's happening versus what we think is happening, and how we evoke change. It's pretty interesting. With us today on this panel, Pam Barroway has 15 years marketing and communications experience. Her work spans web, print, and email editing, as well as short-form copywriting. With her pen in hand, or virtually in mind, she promotes your voice over all online media platforms. Tom Rhodes, our second panelist, has spent more than 40 years in sales and retail management. His passion is learning and passing on knowledge and experience to others through teaching and through leadership. And I'm really excited because Scott is a co-host today, so you've got such an extra special guest. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
When we're thinking about the work we must do, the skills we must use in exchange for money so that we may be a contributing part of society and be able to support our families and make sure we have roofs over our heads, food on the table, things like that. And it's an ebb and a flow. And when we're facing potentially having to drop everything and get on a plane, or to drive 3 hours to a meeting, or to show up early for a meeting, or to stay late for a project, we've got other complementary and sometimes competing requirements for ourselves, the obligations that we have as individuals. When we find ourselves in those situations and we're a single parent, or our partner is traveling, or our neighbors are out of town, whatever our personal network might be, and it's not there, how do we hold and maybe even start creating a boundary that we can always lean on?
The expectation now is that associates will make the sacrifices necessary to help the company win. And that oftentimes conflicts with the need and want to be a parent. In today's society, where we're having a lot of struggles with families and parenting and bullying and all these type of things, I think that the fact that we've become so obsessed with winning in business has put parents in a difficult situation and has hurt parenting as a whole. I know that in the companies I've worked for, they expect you to drop what you're doing in a second to take care of whatever they need, whether your family needs you or not. That's the wrong priority. And I think we can do well in business and be successful and be very profitable and still find a way to allow our working associates to be parents and have families that are successful also. That's not the direction we're in right now.
My husband and I, we are pretty atypical because my husband, he is a financial advisor. He is a contractor through Ameriprise, but essentially it's his business. And he works 10 minutes from home, which is really atypical. So I work from home, he works 10 minutes from home. He was doing that when our son was born, and I was going to go back and work part-time. After my 3-month maternity leave, and we were thinking really, really hard about it, and basically I was going to go back to work to keep my son in daycare. The couple $100 I'd be clearing per week. And we're like, is this really worth it? And it wasn't. That's how I came into the freelance. That's really worked for us. And what you were saying about you have to prioritize and sometimes you just have to go and work when your kid is sick or something. We were able to reorganize our lives so that we didn't have to do that. Being a freelancer, I work part-time. Sometimes I work the high end of part-time, sometimes the low end of part-time. If I'm working on a pretty involved project, my husband is able to come home, especially when my son was a little younger, and maybe watch him if I really had a deadline that had to be done. So we live extremely atypical lives. That being said, I worked in corporate for 25 years, and I know how it is. I remember going on an interview once, and they asked me, would you give your all to the company come first? My answer was this: I don't live to work, I work to live. Of course, I would give you my best on the job, but long story short, I did not get that job. What you're saying is so true. It's not ideal, and I know that the life that we have with our son is so not typical of what most working parents do these days.
How do I make this work when my son is sick? Just because I'm the boss doesn't give me special treatment. What have I done for everybody else? How do I respond to everybody else and make sure that I respond to myself in the same way? And it's really neat to have the awareness and be able to do that, because I can go, oh, I really like that as a mom. And oh, sometimes I might be a little too lenient here when I'm thinking about being the steward of the business that I run. And so being able to have that awareness is, in my opinion, kind of like that first step of going, okay, so now I understand what it means to be on both sides of this in a different way. Now, the bigger the organization, the harder that line is to find, and the harder the line is to communicate a standard or a way we work together when we're at work that everybody can buy into. And I mean, we're talking about parenting here and being parents and the assumptions that are made about us. Yet at the same time, assumptions can be made about everybody. I mean, it could be somebody whose parents live with them. It could be somebody who has 16 dogs. It could be...
Tom, you may or may not know, I've worked with Jess since 2012. One of the reasons that I feel so fortunate to be working with Jess is because she has, as a leader, and I do consider her like a leader in her business, but also in work as well, is that the flexibility and the understanding, we can always make something work. So if I know I have something coming up, I bring it up well in advance. One of the advantages of working with somebody like Jess is that she gets that life happens. But I really liked what you said about the larger the organization, the more difficult it becomes. Because unless the powers that be have this mindset, Jess, it does not filter down.
One of the companies I've worked for, an extremely large company, a retailer, by the way, has a point system. You get a certain amount of points basically before you don't have a job anymore. So if you get sick and then your kids get sick, you're close to that point level, that you're carrying for 6 months, basically. So you wake up in the morning and your 10-year-old has got to go to the doctor and you're on 7 points and 8 gets you fired. What's your option at that point in time? The retail industry is notorious for this. When I was in a more of a position where I could kind of lead that situation, the kids were sick. I never assigned the points. My feeling was, if I'm running a large store and I don't have other people trained to do that person's job, then I'm not doing my job in the first place. Because if you're so reliant on one person that they can't go out and take care of their family, or their mother gets sick, or their father gets sick, or their father passes away, or whatever the case may be, and you can't help them through that and make sure they have a job when they come back, then you're doing something wrong as a business in the first place. And then you expect loyalty for them. That's not going to happen.
I worked in corporate communications, 20, 25 years. And the last year that I worked full time, I'm pregnant for 9 months during that, I never took a day off up until the day I went to give birth, so that I could have all of my sick time, all of my vacation time added on to the 3 months. And they had a very generous leave policy. I had a full 3 months, which was very nice. And I was able to add some stuff onto that too. When you're pregnant, there are some days you just feel like crap.
Yeah, sure.
I had my son at 42. So they want you to go in for all these tests every month. I found a doctor who had nighttime hours, thank God, because, you just can't continue to take every time you take off from work to go to the doctor. That's more time. All this factored into why I didn't go back to work. Other Western countries have radically different ways of looking at it. I think that it would be so beneficial if we could have some policies like that. It would make it a lot easier for working parents. It would make them better workers because it makes it easier for them. It's not a big giveaway because what you're getting back is more.
An average store for one of the companies I work for average 120, 130 people in a store. If somebody gets the flu, you're probably going to have 50 or 60 of those people sick at some point in time. Mm-hmm. But they all have to come to work, because if they don't come to work, then they're taking a chance of having a job. You have 10 or 15 people running a register and they're not feeling well, and they're supposed to give great customer service to that person they're checking out. And they don't want to be there because they want to be home in bed. And then you wonder why service levels in retailers are not as good. And you have all these complaints and so on and so forth. Okay, if you treat people with the understanding that they're people before they're associates, you will get much more loyalty, much better customer service, and people will come to work every day happy when they're not sick.
By 2020, which is like right around the corner now, 50% of our workforce could be contractors. Well, whether you're a solopreneur or a contractor, there are different rules around that. There are benefits to organizations. There are benefits to the contractor, whoever's filling that role. Yet there are downsides too. And the more that I work with businesses, the more I see some downsides of contractors. One, that's your shingle, right? You're a contractor. If you're sick and you don't work, you don't get paid. And then there's no money coming in, and there's less chance of a job tomorrow than if you have some sort of a point system. Yet on the other side, it's a monetary benefit to have contractors for organizations for a variety of reasons, yet they have no chance, no matter how good of an organization, no matter how great the culture is, no matter what the relationships are, there's much lower loyalty opportunity is what I would call it. And so you've got these two circles that we're trying to figure out how it works in this overlapping circle, and how can we make this work, yet everybody is in completely different places. And so I'm thinking, Scott, about that stat, and I'm thinking about everything that Tom and Pam have shared. What are your thoughts so far?
After World War II, there was some wage and salary freeze. So healthcare was assumed by companies and corporations as a competitive edge. Come work for me because we'll give you healthcare. Well, as that became institutionalized, it became less of a differentiation between different companies. Now it's a little bit more of an albatross around one's neck, and yet there still needs to be something that differentiates one company from another to attract the best talent. The quote-unquote enlightenment in terms of being family-friendly, in terms of being woman-friendly, is one of those competitive edges. Mm-hmm. So when you're applying for a job, one of the legitimate questions would be, well, what's your culture? How do you feel about children? How do you feel about bringing my dog to work?
Furry and scaly kids, yep.
Obviously, this is on people's radar screen. So do you think society's catching up and that there are just a few people who are on hard times, or do you think that it's just tougher for people nowadays?
Both parents almost have to work from a financial standpoint. Unfortunately, the businesses have the power, because if you walk away because you want to be with your family and you don't go into your business of your own, Pam's gone into a business of her own. Not everybody can do that. And if you don't do that, then you are basically subject to whatever the companies want to pay you and whatever they're going to give you for benefits or not give you for benefits. And I live in the South. We're not seeing any growing economy at this point in time that's creating 1 million jobs. Okay. So, it's tough. It's tough down here. People are working harder, but they're not getting any place. There's a lot of hamster things going on here. Working very hard, going in a circle, nothing happening. When you are making people make choices between family and work, they may choose work, but they're about a half the associate that you really hired in the first place. And that doesn't help the businesses either.
If there was a serious conversation in our country about childcare,
which, by the way, for many families is the second largest expense immediately
Sure.
following mortgages.
Childcare was the deciding factor in why I didn't go back. Even though I had a part-time situation, it wasn't worth it. Why would I work to pay for childcare when I could just do a little belt tightening and take away that expense?
I'm thinking here, and I'm thinking about this concept of a livable wage. Washington, where I used to live, and Scott still lives, in Seattle, passed a livable wage. Boulder County, where I live now, recently passed the livable wage requirement. In the county that I live in here, in Boulder County, if it's a single mother's household and she's the only income earner and the only adult in the house, she has to make over $70,000 to be able to cover childcare and to provide a house and then just take care of regular living. That's the county that I live in. But to know how much you have to make and to know that there are some other standards and the double standard or the assumptions that are coming up, can you share with us one of the biggest obstacles that you had with a standard that somebody else gave you that didn't fit you as a working parent?
When I was a district manager for a retail company, the only time I really saw my daughter was on the weekends. That was my option. That's the only time I had her. I went from a regional vice president who was very fine with that to one who decided that basically our job was a 7-day-a-week job, which made it virtually impossible for me to meet his standard because when was I going to see my daughter? Now, it turned out for me, this was my decision. My daughter was more important than that job. Awful that you are put in a position you have to make that decision, honestly. You shouldn't have to choose between your children and your job, ever. That was my choice, and kind of we went in that direction, but I hate to see that happening. I will mention, I was going to say this before, and this kind of fits in. I know a lot of couples now, younger couples, who have children, their first child, maybe first or second child, where one works first shift and one works third shift. So they trade the child off, basically. So they're saving the cost of daycare, but what is it costing them on the other side as far as relationship is concerned, as far as health is concerned, all these type of things? It just seems to me crazy that we're paying CEOs billions of dollars or upper millions of dollars, and these people have to make choices like that. Doesn't make sense to me, but that's how it is right now.
We've got to value the skills that we have versus the money somebody is willing to give us for the skills that we bring to make something happen in an organization, to allow a product to be delivered in such a way that the people who are being presented with said product are willing to trade their dollars for it.
The question I was going to ask, when does the value of our skills outweigh the value of our being a parent?
See, I try and keep those separate. I know that we're in a society right now, specifically in the US, and I know there are other countries in similar situations to ours where the pendulum seems to be starting to swing back. It's less about business and more about community, less about business and more about relationship. What would your answer to that question be, Tom?
Well, for a lot of people, that's a very individual, personal answer. And for me, my family is more important than my value is in business. If I'm not using my skills as a parent, I'm giving my children the best opportunity to be the best they can be down the road. For some people, I think it's that if we don't provide them financially with every single thing they need, then we're not giving them the best opportunity. So I think to some degree the answer is, what do you think is going to be the best for your children? The financial part of it and a big house and a fancy neighborhood, or time with them? To me, it's time with them. But somewhere in there, we have to be able to get as much as we can of one and still be the best parent from a time standpoint. And I think companies have to be a little more willing to allow that to happen. How do we say to people, okay, listen, we have a series of things you need to do to accomplish today. When you've accomplished them, we're going to give you that time to either develop yourself in your job, or maybe you're going to go to your daughter's softball game instead, or whatever the case may be, and not make it be a punishment.
One of the things that I was unable to do in Seattle, when I lived east of Seattle, because I didn't know how, and I didn't understand what was missing. And some of this was modeled to me from my family of origin. And some of this was because I'd never been in need of a personal network before. But this concept of, yes, we all have obligations, and yes, we have people that we can call on, and yes, we have all these people across social media that will pipe in and say, yay, and here's how it's going, and it looks great. But you can't call them up when you have a flat tire. You can't call them up to get your child home from school since you're too far away at a meeting and you're not going to get to the school in the time frame that you're supposed to be able to do that. So one of the things, and to me, this is important regardless of the level of the organization that we are at and where we are working, whether we're somewhere toward the top of 1,500 or 2,500 people in an organization, this concept of a personal network is, I think, really important. And yes, we bring our personal life to work. And yes, we take our professional life home, our work life home. But how do we cultivate this? And this was something that was shared to me by a woman named Sue Mackey, who Scott introduced me to. And when she told me this, I didn't want to believe her at first, okay? I didn't want to own the fact that I might need some help. Yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized I need more than just help. I just need somebody to have the extra key to my house in case I get locked out or my child gets locked out. I need somebody to check the mail and make sure packages are off the porch when I'm out of town. Again, all the other stuff too. And so what it takes to build that personal network is so important. And there's skills that when we are two working families and we live in suburbia or we live in a city and we don't know our neighbors is really a limitation to us. One of the things that I have found is that I eliminate standards that people think of me or might think of me because I can show up in a different way because I have certain things taken care of. One of which is knowing my neighbors and recognizing who they are and being able to say hello. One of which is to invite some neighbors over to have dinner, whether we have kids of the same age or not, so that we get to know each other as people and we understand how we might be able to support each other. And I've got certain neighbors, I'll go ask for eggs or baking soda. I've got other neighbors, I ask to keep the key to our house. I've got other neighbors that if there's an emergency, that's where we go. And it only happens because I was like, okay, I know it's going to take time. Building relationships take time. This is going to save me time in the future. I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about this in this personal network. What skills do I need as a person to build my personal network? And the first is courage to say,
as a business leader, wouldn't it behoove you to build that community within your business so that if Jane got sick or Jane's child got sick, then Jack could move in and take up some of what they were supposed to accomplish so that she could go and be with the child?
I think you went exactly where I wanted to go was, so first, as an individual at any level, how do I build that personal network? And then once I've got that personal network, now I have a new skill. I get to add value to the business. That means I can figure out, how do I cover for Jack? How do I cover for Scott or Pam or Tom when they need to step away for a little bit unexpectedly and things can still happen? Because realistically, every single one of us is replaceable. Unless we are the only person in our business and everybody who works with us are contractors like a Heart Internet or our cell phone provider or things like that. So I think you're absolutely right, Tom. But if we don't have those skills as leaders, how can we even think about the rhythm of what it looks like when life happens and who owns a decision or a role? And what happens when that person is not in the office? Who can step in seamlessly and fill in and know they're not going to get reprimanded, they're not going to do it wrong, they're going to be seen as lifting up everybody?
There must be companies out there in the United States that are like that, but they're few and far between. I've read about companies started by people who have the mindset that you are describing. Unless the owners or the CEOs want and cultivate that mindset, is not going to happen organically.
I think that you have a lot of businesses that start as private companies that have that mentality, and the minute they become public, that mentality goes away.
Because they're beholden to their shareholders.
They're beholden to shareholders now, not to just the people who work there. You mentioned loyalty. Companies want you to be loyal to them. Companies have no interest in being loyal to you. in a lot of cases. So I think that when you are the type of leader that says, hey, you know, I hear your son's sick, or I hear it's his birthday, why don't you go spend the day with him? That's like putting loyalty in the bank. The next time you need them for something special, that person's going to remember that you let them go home for their son's birthday, and they're going to do that for you. There's not enough of that. Loyalty is a one-way street in a lot of businesses, and I think that's unfortunate because there's so much opportunity to create loyalty as a two-way street in the business, which overall will make your business 100% stronger because those people will stay there. So they'll grow with the business. Instead of having 4, 5, and 6-year associates or employees, you have 10 and 20-year employees. And wouldn't we all like that now? Because how many people change jobs every 4 or 5 years now? Because there's no loyalty either way.
In a couple of weeks, I'm doing a live program here in the Denver area, and we're actually going to be talking about this very thing, what we think values mean versus how they actually show up in the workplace. And so I'm curious from you guys, just right now, in the workplace, what does loyalty mean to you?
A boss who values my work, but also has a little give if something is challenging is going on that I need to take care of, and it has flexibility. So I can ask that of them, but they can also ask that of me if something's going on with them.
Mm-hmm. And how about you, Tom? What, from your heart,
well,
what does loyalty?
For me, it's that they value me as a person as much as they value me as a worker. I would try to make sure that I knew the names of every wife, names of every child, when their birthdays were, because the first thing I wanted to know was that person as a person. Then I wanted to learn what their skills were. And, okay, now you have those skills. Where do you want to go? What do you see yourself in a couple of years? Mm-hmm. You stay in this role? You want my job? You know, whatever the case may be, right. Whatever it is. But to get to know that person as a person, when they see that your interest in them is not just their employee number and not just what you're doing for them today at this moment, you earn their loyalty. Loyalty is a lot like respect. You got to earn their loyalty by showing some loyalty.
There is another definition that you guys haven't mentioned before I share it. Scott, what's your definition of loyalty?
It could be thought of that loyalty speaks more of the individual than the circumstance, because it doesn't necessarily have to be reciprocated. It's a value of honoring what is valuable in something else to the level of pledging allegiance to it. It's worth so much that I'm willing to sacrifice, or I'm willing to affix myself enough to this. Could be a company, could be a cause, could be to someone else, so as to ensure that they benefit along with me, and they might even benefit even if I don't benefit as much. For some reason, we all want to believe in something that is bigger and better than ourselves. What is that is the transaction between ourselves and that bigger cause? That's one of the stronger bonds, would be the loyalty that we have towards it.
Each of you have similarities in your definition of loyalty. Sometimes, and I've experienced this, I've found people that are just like, you know what? I'm going to be there when I say I'm going to be there. I may be there in body and I may be on my phone the whole time, but I'm there, so I'm loyal to you. The other one is also bringing a level of integrity to it. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. So if I tell you I'm going to do something, you know I'm loyal because I do what I say and I follow through. So there are 2 other definitions. Right. So there are 5 now that were shared. Some have some overlap. Yet if our perspective is so in the one that we come from, and somebody else shows up and says, of course I'm loyal too, and it might be the person that's just showing up, that's a cause for miscommunication. And in fact, that's where I see the biggest issue, is that we don't have shared meaning as an organization of how we do loyal together to get our jobs done and the product delivered. Isn't that interesting? And that's a place that we can work by each one of you, something that you said that I really embrace and feel in my own heart, which is it's how we show up every day. It's our purposeful action. And when we're doing it with intent, can we also have the intent to see, could the other person be doing the same thing in a way that they've been trained or in a way that they believe that might be different, and we're actually going in the same direction, we just don't know it.
You're just coming at it from 2 different perspectives, you mean?
Yeah.
Like so many things in life, there's more than one definition. There's more than one way of getting to loyal. It doesn't mean that one is more valid than the other. It's if you recognize that there are different perspectives of loyalty, different ways to get there. I mean, as long as your perspective of loyal isn't to the detriment of somebody else.
And this is not how I am, I'm going to use this one just because it's so different than everybody else's. If my definition of loyal is to just show up, even if I'm checking email while we're having a meeting, right? If that's my definition of loyal and your definition of loyal is different, that just means there's a place for a way to communicate better. How do we do loyal? Okay, so for loyal, I want you to know when my kid's birthday is. And I want you to actually be looking at me in the eyes when you're not taking notes on a piece of paper during our meeting. And by the way, it's more than showing up. I would much rather you say, let's reschedule instead of just only be half here. Whatever that case may be, and actually say, this is what it looks like, and this is what we're going to do, which means everybody compromises. And that compromise is actually a win. It's not because we're leaving anything on the table. We're not defeated. We're actually saying, okay, so when we're in this place and we're in this situation, this is what we do. And my definition of loyalty fits enough, and your definition of loyalty fits enough that we both feel invited to the table.
Right.
I've got a perfect example of that. My mom is 81, and she lives about an hour away. She comes over once a week, generally to see my son and just to spend some time. And sometimes that occurs on the day when we have our team meeting, Jess.
Yeah.
And I mean, it doesn't happen every week, but so sometimes it does. And on those days, I would usually tell you in advance, and we figure out, do I need to come to the meeting? Can I come to the meeting for like 5 or 10 minutes and get the editing and writing stuff out of the way first, so that I can participate and then go? I really appreciate that flexibility, and that engenders loyalty, both coming from both ways.
Some of the definitions I heard about loyalty, I would classify into the category of professionalism. If one is professional, one will do this, that, and the other thing. And I can see that they would do that if they're loyal, but I could also see them, if they're professional, saying, well, I may not be loyal to you, but I'm going to do this anyway because that is a professional standard that I'm going to meet. So I guess my question is, what correlation, if any, is there between professionalism and loyalty?
I think loyalty is part of being a professional. That's in my opinion. I think that if you aren't loyal to your team, to your community, to the people you work with, then I think you are on the outer edge of being a professional.
Is loyalty something that needs to be earned, or is loyalty something that is to be expected?
I don't think that I'm doing a very good job as a professional if I haven't earned their respect. It's not a question of liking. I think you're going to always do things in a business situation where there are going to be times when people aren't going to like you because you have to make tough decisions sometimes. That's just a fact. You can do that in a respectful manner, and you can always earn people's respect. And I think that when you show them some loyalty, that you believe in them, that you're going to do the things that help them in their life, not just in their job, I think that helps you create loyalty. And if you aren't willing to do that, if you go and say, well, listen, you're a really good associate for me, but if you can't be here every single minute of every single day, then, and aren't loyal enough to be here for me, then, I don't expect them to have any loyalty to me because I'm not doing anything for them. I was taught many years ago that people didn't work for you, they worked with you. And I think that every integrity, respect, all those terms we use in business and in leadership, it's a two-way street. You don't get it, you don't get it. You have to earn it. You don't just walk in the door and all of a sudden, because you're in this position, you get all this big list of things. No, you have to treat people in such a way to earn that. You have to show your integrity. You have to show your loyalty. You have to treat people with respect to get it. You have to communicate. You have to listen if you expect them to listen to you. All those things to me are a two-way street. There is no, it's just, I'm going to tell you to do it. You can do that. I mean, people do that, but I don't think you'll ever be successful doing it.
But what I think I've also heard you say is that for an aspiring manager, there's a secret sauce, and it might be regardless of what the overall corporate culture is, there's a culture that you can surround yourself with. There's an approach that you can have. And regardless of what your boss might say or what the company might say, there are opportunities for you to have that mutual respect, to work with your associates rather than having them work for you, to do the sorts of things that would engender loyalty and two-way loyalty.
I think that's very fair, and I'm going to go back a while for this, but back in the late 90s into the early 2000s, I worked as a communications manager at a savings and loan. And my second boss on the job was a guy who was very old school, but he was a real mentor. And he wanted everybody in the department to be able to grow in their jobs. That made him a good manager, showed me what a good manager should be in supporting the people underneath you and encouraging them to expand their abilities and be the best that they could be.
Your position doesn't really decide whether you're a leader or not. It's how you act and how you treat other people and how you work with people to help them grow. And do you act with humility? Do you teach and coach and develop and all those things that come with leadership other than in relationship to just being a manager who manages operations? Leadership is about people. And when you can move from being just an operations guy that looks at numbers and processes and all those things to at least include in that a people guy who develops and helps people get promoted and all those type of things. It doesn't matter what your position is. You have to be a leader to be a good parent. You're growing your kids, right?
You have to be a good leader to be a good parent, and you have to be a good parent to be a good leader.
Exactly.
I think it goes both ways because it's what we're not doing at the office. And if we have problems at home, but we think we're a great manager, well, there's something to be said for the fact that it's probably not the case and we've got our head in the sand, and vice versa. If we've got problems at work, but we think everything's okay at home, well, there's probably some overlap there. And where is that? And you're right. That's kind of up to us to figure that out. Our bosses, our managers, our companies they have a whole different purpose. So it's you're right. It's how we show up.
Yeah, it's how we show up every day. And if you can show yourself up as a leader, you'll have a successful group that works with you.
Yeah, seriously. I told you that this conversation was going to cover the gamut, and we only scratched the surface. In fact, we probably kind of picked up a little bit here and there, but it's enough to recognize there are elements of company culture that we don't think about, that we take for granted, that we assume are typical because it's the way business is done. Well, we got to take the air quotes off of the way business is done and actually do business the right way, the better way, what actually makes us competitive, what actually makes us lasting, and what actually allows us to be there and show up and want to, and the people that work with us to be able to do the same. You will find all the program notes for the double standards facing working parents at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P138. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 138. Subscribe and rate this program. It's through your subscriptions and telling us how you like the programs, in addition to sharing your stories online using hashtag VBBRadio, that we will know what you want. We can shape the programs to support you, the challenges you face, the opportunities that you see, and between all of those things, define through the Voice of Bold Business Radio what it means to be a leader today. It's important to recognize leadership, and our personal awareness to find and navigate the double standards facing working parents and all people.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.